Right. Hello, everybody. Hello out there to Barcelona. We have a guest from Barcelona today, and welcome to Barbara, who will be introduced shortly. We're very jealous that that you sit in beautiful Barcelona. Innsbruck is not too shabby today, but the winter is here now, so we are now in a completely different time zone. It feels like it. Welcome to all of you on your screens from wherever you are. I'm just going to say a few words on last week. Last week we had two colleagues here from Innsbruck University who'd talked about their project, Chill the Base, which was concerned with the needs and issues non-traditional students have at Austrian or Tyrolean universities or institutions of higher education. We talked about what it means to be a sort of non-traditional student, which is a certain terminology which is more open than naming one analytical category of difference. So it's not focused on a specific category of difference, but it kind of embraces a broader approach. Of course, the question is, who is a traditional student? And then we get right into the very tricky matter of visibility of differences. What last week played a huge role was family background, the academic family background. What did parents and grandparents do of the students that we have here, and how likely is it that you join a university when neither your parents, nor your mother and father, or your grandparents actually had an academic education? What I found very interesting last week is that we look at institutions of higher education, but of course differences start earlier, and we actually went all the way back to kindergarten, where education starts and where sort of students learn how to make a difference in a way. Today we have a little bit of a different approach. Barbara will talk to us about feminist intersectionality. You remember the concept of intersectionality from our first session. We talked about the different the different axes of diversity. We talked about inequality and Barbara will introduce a new aspect to us today, sexual and gender-related violence, and I'm very excited to see what she's going to cover under this approach. And maybe we can then, in the Q&A, also talk a little bit about intersectionality, about how you tackle this angle from a feminist point of view, and how we can link it back to the first session. I will now hand over to Dirk, who will introduce Barbara for us.
Thank you, Silke, and welcome also from my side. And it's great to have you here, Barbara, in our online lunch seminar. Barbara Biglia comes to us from today, as we heard, from Barcelona, where she also received her PhD in 2006 in psychology. And she is currently associate professor in the Department of Pedagogy at Rovira e Virgili University, which is our partner university in the Aurora network in Tarragona, only an hour away from Barcelona. Barbara researches different topics from the perspective of gender and feminism, topics like processes of knowledge production and feminist epistemology, gender-based violence, sociological analysis of public policies, and so on. She is founder and an active member of different research networks in the area of interdisciplinary feminist research and also intercultural education. And she has been the Catalan coordinator of the EU GEPWork and USV React project, and is also currently investigator in these project settings. She also works on visualizing and measuring the problems of sexual and gender violence in universities, and this brings us, of course, to our topic today, back to issues of higher education and diversity. You can already see the title of her talk here, the need for a feminist intersectional approach to tackle sexual and gender-related violence within higher education institutions. Thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us here in our lecture series and bringing in your perspective on this topic. And with this, I hand over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Dirk and Silke, for this invitation and for organizing this course or series of lecture that is extremely interesting and is a very great opportunity of interchange between different contexts. And please, thank you very much also to everybody that is out there in the network. And I don't know who is and where you are, but I hope you have some insight from the talk, and it creates some curiosity and you want to reflect a little bit more. So I will be really, really happy of any question, criticism, comments, whatever you think it can be interesting to share with us. So please don't stop. And if there is something that my English is not completely understandable, please also let me know, that I may sometime invent some word or whatever. Okay. So let's start. As Dirk was saying, I like to. Well, this is my little index of what I'm going to present shortly. And I would like to start with talking about roots and contextualization, because I'm particularly, I'm very situated, I'm in the paradigm of the situated knowledge. So I think that we have to know where we start from. So it's not just a question of studying on gender, but I think I am a feminist, and I have been a feminist since many years ago, much before I became an academic worker. That I don't feel also an academic, but a worker in the academia. So in 2005, with a friend, for example, we wrote this book, Estado de Wonderbra, State of Wonderbra, to talk about gender-related violence and to talk about how does they are not individual matter, but they are related with our society, with our structure of within the society and whatever. So that was a first step in working in this area. And I start with the gap work, a European project on educating educator on how to prevent and detect gender-related violence. A problem is that normally the focus is, normally not, but frequently the focus is on young people. Like if educator was already well aware of the problem and were able to correct it, and we believe that is not so true. That is a problem of adultism we normally have. So we wanted to work with adults, and especially with teacher. And in the US VREAT, we also do a similar work with teacher and administrative people within the university. Now we are in this last project where I'm last at the moment actual project, that is SGRV. And in this is more national ones, but we work mostly on visibilizing and also nuancing from a feminist intersectional perspective. What does we mean with gender and sexual related violence? So, okay. One of the things that we are doing in this project is trying to construct a survey from the experience of people that is living gender-related violence within the university. In this sense, we are doing a lot of groups with different people, and we especially are interested in a collective or group that have been less studied in this sense. So, for example, racialized people, dissident, sexual dissident people, but also people with a diagnosis of psychological diagnosis or psychiatric diagnosis, survivor of sexual-related violence, and the different able people, and finally a group that is generally not very studied, that is people that work in a university as subcontractor. So, for example, the cleaning lady or the people that work in the cafeteria. Actually, we had some problem at this point with this because we started our research just when the pandemic started. So with other groups, it was easier to maintain the research online, but with the subcontracted people was much more difficult to have contact. So we still have something to do in this sense. So to go in what we understand with sexual and gender-related violence, we want to remember that we are not focusing on the subject that is exercising the violence, but on how does this violence is genderized. Okay, so it is a question of how gender power intervene within the violence, and that's very important for us. So in this sense, it is not just women that suffer gender-related violence, but then, as we will see later, it didn't mean that everybody will suffer violence at the same way. I included here some picture. Like, for example, obviously the heteropatriarchal family, that is one of the social stratus that more important for the reproduction of the gender-related violence, but also a picture of Billy Elliot on stereotypes, even on children, on male children, and the sexualization, for example, and ethnicization of the body of Black women, for example. So we slightly move the attention from the subject. I make interview, but okay, I wrote incorrectly. From the subject that receive or produce the violence to the structure of oppression. So in this sense, it will link a lot with the fourth section I have heard. You have been done. I read it. I do my homework, and I was following you. So. Also, another important thing, since that when we talk about sexual violence, we have to remember that it's much more than rape. It's not just a penal penetration but there is much more elements and events that are sexual violence, and that they are quite common. And when we focus just on the more explicit or more bigger one, we lose the big picture, but also we are not able to prevent that bigger experience can be detected and solved, okay? So, here is the things, as you were already talking about intersectionality. I'm not going to enter in deeper on it, but it is really important to remember, for who was not at your section, that the word intersectionality was firstly used by Black feminists to point out the discrimination that is not just a double discrimination, but a specific discrimination that women of color will receive, and to see that people do not have just don't lie just under one structure of oppression, but by different one, and they intersect particularly. In this sense, one of the problems of the use intersectionality nowadays is that it's becoming a very common word, and it even seems more nice than feminism, because it seems that everybody is intersectional, and obviously everybody is intersectional, but most of us are in a position of privilege, so it didn't mean that is all the same. So we aim to recognize, to use a feminist perspective, intersectional perspective, to understand gender-related violence, but this didn't mean that the subject that receive this violence are still mostly women, children of every gender, and transsexual people, and not heteronormative people. So, and at the same time, people that mostly exercise this violence are just men. And we have to recognize this. This didn't imply that the women cannot exercise gender-related violence, but it implied that in a normally in a relation, for example, in a partner relation, in a heterosexual partner relation, if a woman exercises violence, it is not gender-related violence, because it's not because this is a woman or a man, but because of the structure of power. But yes, a woman, for example, can exercise power when it say to children, don't cry, otherwise you are a girl. Okay, that's sexual and gender-related violence. Okay, so basically, we want to understand the gender-related violence in an expression of lack of power, and also it brings to a form of governance to women and other not normative gender and sexual preference not normative subjects. Okay, I like very much this picture because it represents for me a lot of what happened with gender-related violence. If you don't, if you didn't need to exercise your power over other, if you really believe that you have it. So this is a trick problem that we will have to solve in our work. So talking about entering directly in what happened within the university, sometimes it seems that gender violence is a new phenomenon, but actually it is an elephant in the room. Already in the 17th of last century, there was a group of feminists, for example, in Berkeley University, organizing against sexual harassment within the university. And in the USA's, some statistics, some start to be displayed on what happened within the campus. Okay, nonetheless, it was in 2030 that coinciding more or less with the phenomenon of Me Too and whatever in this same period, okay, that we have more visibility on what's going on. For example, here we have an experience of a woman that have been raped within the university. She have been recognized, and so she was doing performative art action, direct action, going around with her mattress for in the university. Okay. Another element that is still an elephant in the room, especially in the North Country, where gender-related violence within the university are more recognized, more acknowledged, is that what is acknowledged is normally the rape or sexual violence that occurs between students. And sexual violence from professor to students, or gender violence from professors to students, or between professor, between administrative people, and between them is much less recognized and tackled. So we believe it's a big problem, because exactly if we recognize that power is one of the reasons because this happened, and this violence is much less recognized, but also much more difficult to denounce and to act against it. So if we talk about this hidden experience, we have also to recognize that what we are able to know about what happened are just a very, very slightly portion of what is going on. In our research, in our interview, we, for example, receive a response from some survey provider of survivor service provider, and they mention how difficult it is for racialized people or differently able people to make a public denunciation. So basically there is, at least here in Catalonia, there is no evidence of the sexual or gender-related violence suffered by people, racialized people, or disabled people, different functionally people. Sorry, it's difficult to say for me, in the university. That is always something that is hidden. And also, if we look at research, we can find that, for example, in the United States, the research showed that a lot of LGBTQ plus people within the university, they use a strategy called a strategic closet. So not to show their preference, their sexual preference, in order not to suffer violence, okay? That is in itself a violence. If you cannot show your preference, is in itself a violence. Other experience we have recollected about the intersectionality experience of gender-related violence is that, for example, there is no any sensibility about functional and cognitive diversity in the university. So it's quite common to have offensive or violent comments against cognitive functionally diverse people. Among peers, in this sense students, because the person was talking was a student, but also from professors. So this is also why does we allow this to happen is not a violence, and how it is become also a gender violence when the kind of joke, for example, that are played are genderized, okay? At the same time, Muslim girls, for example, express how does the discrimination they receive because they bring a scarf is extremely different from the one that male students receive. Same happened with we here in Spain. We have a lot of Latin American professors, students, and whatever. And the same happened with them. For example, when it's assumed that a Latin girl, a Latin woman, cannot be a professor, but she should be the secretary. Okay, this is something very common. And one group we didn't analyze in depth, but I think it will be also interesting to talk about is Erasmus students or international students that they generally receive, women generally receive a great amounts of gender-related violence, and because they have no network, they cannot defend themselves and they don't know what to do. So basically, we believe that university, we have to recognize that we are not in an ivory tower. Knowledge or level of education is not enough in order not to reproduce violence. But also the system within the university is facilitating this violence. First, because there is strong power hierarchy in our university, and it's well recognized within all the studies that within a power relation, within a working environment, gender violence is being stronger. Okay. Secondly, because we have these neoliberal environments that is much focused on effectiveness, efficiency in the market, that on a really educative process. It seems we have to create a good worker for the market instead of people with value, with a human experience that is positive both for the university and outside. Also, and related with this power hierarchy is that is a strange, at least here in the South, is a strange mix between a feudal system in which, in order to have a position, you have to be serving the king, and a superfilial system in which obviously we are all a family, but like it happened within the family, the violence is strong, the dependency is strong, and the gender relation is an issue, an X that cross all this relation. Okay, the cooperative defense is another one. Many universities didn't want to recognize that it would happen in their space, and the bureaucratization, it makes very, very difficult to denounce within the university, to know to whom you have to denounce, how, and who can help you. And then another things is that obviously the competence of the university against penal act, for example, are not strong, because we are educative spaces. So it's like, okay, if you tell this to us, we tell you that is not our responsibility. You have to go to the other, for example, for a normal court or judgment and whatever. Okay, and finally, the politically correctness that is typical in the university. Obviously, you can make a very offensive and sexist and violent joke in a good way that it seems even nice to people, so that people cannot recognize it. Okay, and on the other side is that it seems that if we acknowledge publicly, and if we include in our statement of the university statement that we are zero tolerance university, that means that we are zero tolerance, and we can use good words to say it, and so nothing is going on. No, it's not me, So that's a very, very big problem. Okay, the precarization within the university is another of the element that allow the gender-related violence to be so strong, especially talking about teaching and administrative staff, but also when we talk about students that want to go to make a master, to make a PhD, and then maybe to work within the university. So obviously when you are in a precarious status, it depends on other, and so the violence can be stronger. And the other things is that there is also a equality discourse that is a form of institutional moral violence. We are continuously being told that we are not discriminated, that our university are so egalitarian, okay? But at the same time, meritocracy didn't recognize the different system of position. So the same discourse, it become a violence, because it is, okay, it's not a quality problem, it's me that I'm not able to be so good as to reach this position. So, talking about what does academics are doing in order to respond gender-related violence. What we find in our work is that there is mainly two kind of approach. In the Anglo-Saxon context, there is this approach of sci-fatic and screening that is becoming very, very important. All the university is trying to put more camera in the campus, controlling movements of people, and creating an atmosphere of fear that is obviously not helping a change of culture around sexual and gender-related violence, because It's just you don't have to be seen. It's not that you don't have to do it. You don't have to be seen. And we, as university, the only things that do is check if something is going on. And so you cannot then put a demand on us. But we are not working to change the culture of violence and on gender-related violence. So this is a very, very big problem. Because it's reducing, again, the sexual and gender-related violence as something that, treating it as if it was something that just few persons do because they are bad person, but don't acknowledge what the violence that the same institution are reproducing. The second approach that is mostly in the South is that we are still in deniement. Okay, so our university mostly say, woo, 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 woo. Okay, we can put a policy, but don't let number go out, because otherwise people will believe that we are bad, and that we cannot recognize that we are also, that in our safe space it's happened this. This is something that we see, for example, in the fact that we have some protocols, but there is no visibility on how does protocol works, how many people have been denouncing, the timing that the denouncers have been working on, and the effect or the results of what happened. Obviously, is also a question that there is very few denounced, so you have to maintain anonymity. But with this excuse, we are also producing a perverse system in which people didn't even know that they have their right. And probably if we show the number, people will not denounce in the university, because if you say, okay, it will take 2 years to have a result, if I am a student, I have already finished my university, is not working. Okay. Finally, in some places we have worked quite a lot with some Latin American country, and in many of them, the process is still going on. Many of them, they don't have a specific policy. Some are introducing this in the last year, especially because there is a strong student pressure. For example, how is it happening in these last few years in Mexico. The other things is that policy that we analyzed, they generally dismissing intersectionality. They don't understand how it works, and they tend to homogenizing the experience of violence and neglecting the specific experience of vulnerable group. Obviously, this is something quite common in the legislation and norm, because you have to put a path, you have to describe what have to be done and how things are. And this is really can fit in experience of people. But what is happening is that it's becoming, sometimes the policy can become a violence in itself, a gender violence in itself. So it's quite a crazy situation. And in this sense, also there is quite a lot of re-victimization, because the institutional procedure are not so clear, and because women that experience gender-related violence have to repeat their story many times, and have to prove that they have been aggressed, harassed, or whatever. So the focus, and we will see later that is particularly problematic. The focus is to understand if it was really something legally persecutable. Is correct the word persecutable? Yeah, it's understandable. Okay. At the same time, there is a tendency of disempowering both the subject and the collective. For example, here in Catalonia, at least, that we have studied more in deep the protocol. In any protocol, there is a reference on. Obviously, we know that there can be people that make false denounce, okay, and we have to control that is not. But if you link protocol on other topics, there is never this sentence. So what's happened? False denounce can happen just in the case of gender-related violence? No, obviously not. And in fact, if we study the number, in robbery, for example, false denounce are much, much, much higher than the very little one that happened with sexually generated violence. But in introducing this sentence in the protocol, it positioned the university in a not very friendly way in acknowledging of the gender-related violence. Actually, it reinforces gender-related violence because it see that is anyhow you have to recognize that some women are just inventing it. So don't believe her. The contrary of what we are doing in activism, that we believe, sister, we believe you. Here has we don't believe you, basically. Okay. And also, when some students make some action of self-defense, for example, they make some scratch or some they write on the wall or they put card with the name of a teacher that have been harassing them. Generally, they receive a stronger punishment than the harasser itself. So it's quite crazy. Okay, so what we are suggesting in order to turning the table a little bit, we have made few suggestions. For example, obviously the first of all is visibilizing, and in this sense we want to mention a campaign that have been organized by the UPF here in Catalonia, that they make very short videos for students in order to identify gender-related violence in their context. They are quite easy, quite well done, and the important thing is that they are not putting the focus on the victim, okay? But they are putting the focus on we are all responsible. We have to detect it. We have to prevent it. And you also have to notice that maybe you are exercising some of this violence and is not normal what we are doing. The other things is that we need more detailed data. In our work, we have also, a part of the focus group, we have analyzed a lot of surveys that have been done on sexual and gender-related violence in the university. And we noticed that most of them don't recognize intersectionality. And it's not just that, but they use elements and words that are related with the legal aspect of gender sexual related violence, and many violence are not detected. So we have to create new instruments to detect this violence. The second one is breaking taboo and questioning power. Sex is still a taboo. We don't have education, sexual education within school, and in the university, for example, we still don't have, we have condoms sometimes, but we still don't have, for example, female towel. Like if it was something that we still not have to talk about. And so, and there is this still this idea of relation with sex with the romantic love. This is still going on and is so bad for sexual and gender-related violence. And also, within the university, it's really need a work on how to question power. And I believe that as it's shown in the picture, it has to be done collectively and not just individually. On the other side, we suggest that we have to shifting the focus to the survivor needs, and acting a politic of cares is not our work as university to analyze if legally the person that have been violent have committed a crime or not. But we have to help a person that have felt harassed, even if legally this will not be considered an harassment. So the idea is changing the politics in order to improve mechanism of self-support and of support of students and professor and past and administrative that are suffering this violence. Another thing is that in neoliberal systems, much more the responsibility is being put on the individual that suffered this violence. This is a way of not acknowledging the collective responsibility. So we have to break down this discourse of resilience. Is you, and it's very common in the universities, like you have to be the good one. If you cannot achieve things because you are not self-managing, you are not good in this, you have to be more care. And the same happened with violence. If this teacher is looking at you in this way, maybe you have to look how you dress, maybe you smile too much, so it's something that is continuously going back, re-victimizing the people that have already received violence. Another thing is obviously feminist activists have to be empowered instead of being criticized, and in this sense I bring a few examples from Catalonia and from Mexico, because we have been doing a research in between the two countries. For example, there is this male feminist box where students can denounce anonymously what happened to them, and then they make it public. Okay, this was a very interesting experience, because obviously many women that were not, many students that were not able to denounce through the official path were able to make it know their experience through a less official path. Okay, and the other things is that obviously when you receive gender violence, you really need support. It's very difficult to leave it alone. So this group of peers can be really strong to help each other. And also here we have a more external action. So they take the Congress in the states of Puebla in order to, as I was saying before, in Mexico, violence is very strong, but also students and feminist students are very powerful. So they have said no very strongly, and they have a right to occupy the Congress in order to make their voice hearing. And then another thing is the politics of networking. We are sometimes to use it to understand the university as something isolated, the institution in itself, and we are not having too much contact as institution, at least. I don't mean the single person within the university, but we have to move it out and say that, for example, there is a lot of collective within the community that are already working on prevention and attention to sexual and gender-related violence, and we have to work with them, or LGTB groups and whatever, because also is something that we believe is you cannot just make a training to people that work in the university and they will understand everything, because it's something that we have so interiorized that is not just a question of knowledge. So if we want to do courses, if we want to prepare people, if we want to detect, it's very important that experienced people that have specific knowledge can help us. And also because both students and teachers, we don't not live just in the university. So we don't not need just the support within the university. We need support in our lives. So it's very important. And finally, I think this is my last slides. We have to change the paradigm from inclusion within our system to transformation. Sometimes some idea of diversity model sometimes they talk about valuing the difference with acceptance, tolerance, and inclusion. We talk about minority, about vulnerable people. We believe that this word and this concept can be dangerous, okay? Because when I accept someone, I'm devaluating this person because it needs my acceptation. When I tolerate someone else, I just tolerate people that I don't like, people that I not agree with them. So it's a very paternalistic view of approaching differences. And the same is inclusion. You have to be included in our group. Then when we talk about minority, okay, is women a minority? Or is racialized people a minority? What does we refer? We are talking about minoritized people because we are the ones that are doing the action of transform them in a minority. And the same, people are vulnerable. I don't know how to say in English, but vulnerabilized. So we is not that people are vulnerable in itself for its characteristic, that is part of his identity, but is the process that we are doing that taking from them the possibility of putting in practice their agency. So in conclusion, I believe that what we have, if we really want to tackle gender-related violence within the university, we have also to include a transformative approach of our way of understanding knowledge and institution. And I finish here. Thank you very much. Sorry if I take too much time.
Thank you, Barbara, for guiding us through this flow of ideas and finishing with the big, that big goal, which is, it's not a small endeavor, system transformation, but as you very aptly showed us, that it is basically what needs to be done. All these vocabulary of diversity, as you said, tolerance, inclusion, acceptance, has agency with a majority, with an assumed majority. I accept you, so that implies a hierarchy of power, because I have the power to grant you acceptance, to grant you inclusion. I include you into my circles, not you include me. So there's always an us and them, and there's a majority and a minority. This is basically the model that is that it's based upon, and it's very important to draw attention to this, and also that with these vocabulary we shape our world, we shape our university, because these are the key words that we throw around everywhere at the moment. So there's a lot to talk about, absolutely. And thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to, Dirk, if I may, I would like to stress one point and kind of go back to last week, where this idea of meritocracy has also played a big role. So you can do it if you really want to. You can, because I mean, you have no visible marker of difference. We're all the same here at this institution. Everybody is allowed to go to university. In Austria, we don't pay fees, so there is no socio-economic barrier. Everybody is allowed and everybody can succeed. You know, and that's this narrative of meritocracy, which is of course so much at the very bottom, at the root of neoliberalism. At the same time, we are an institution where we do foster and few people. We don't have everybody at our universities. We don't, but we have a part of society at our universities. So this is why I think this is such a big issue at the university, and we need to talk about this a lot. How can we actually implement it? How can we deal with this? Remaining a university which is in a way an elite institution, but do it differently. And I also want to add one last point in this, and I think it fits very nicely with I think it was the slide, the seventh you had there, the chain or the sixth, the politics of networking. What this idea of neoliberalism does to a university is also that it has the effect of individualizing, and by individualizing, you don't foster groups. You need groups to do politics, though. So it's kind of a depoliticizing university. This is sort of one of the processes I think we can observe, and that's a very dangerous one, because we need we need politics, we need groups. Activism needs groups, but this idea of a neoliberal university and the idea of meritocracy focuses on the individual and doesn't foster an atmosphere of politics. There's lots more to talk about, and I'm sure Dirk has some comments, and then I would also ask Christian if there are any comments in the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barbara. I mean, that was really fascinating, and especially at the very end, right? I mean, system transformation. I mean, what system are we actually talking about, right? Is it only the system of the university, or is it much more? Because actually, what might be needed is a transformation of society as a whole, and university as a part of it, of course, right? And because all these things are reflected in each other, and so I was wondering if you could tell us maybe a little bit more about, so to say, the setting you're working in, right? I mean, you as a researcher, you are situated in the Department of Pedagogy, trained as a psychologist. You're doing this research. How is this? How does that relate to institutions inside the university, or institutional settings you have that take care of these topics and issues, and they take care of, for example, gender-related violence or questions of diversity and so on. I mean, that might be particularly interesting because we here in this setting are faculty colleagues, but also students, and also people working at the university as administrators and so on. So we have the whole university here. I mean, could be, and of course also in the Aurora setting, I guess we are very much interested in this question. How can we make an institutional change, right? This transformation you're talking about. So, and especially in a university where you have all this expertise on these issues, like with people like you. So how is that reflected or brought back to the institution and to an institutional setting in the university?
Do you want me to answer now, or do you want to make?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I would like to mention a little bit things about what Silke. I like both your comments, and I found it more interesting. You were talking about that we have to recognize that we are an elite institution, but yes, but we may not be an elite institution. My ideal, it will be that university will not be an elite institution. So I don't think I really don't think that everybody have to go to the university, because university should be for people that want to go to the university, and we have to evaluate much more the secondary education. And there is people that have done just secondary education and that they are brilliant, intelligent and wonderful people that they can have a fantastic life. It didn't mean that because you pass through the university, you are better or you know more. You know differently. That's the things. So I believe that in my ideal university will be much more diverse, much heterogeneous, but with people that would like to study in the university, that would like to make some more reflection, even theoretically, or and not just to achieve a title for having a specific opportunity, working opportunity. I think that this is a problem of the university. So I will consider it not, I will love that will become not an elitarian place, but where people that independently on the possibility, economical possibility, they can have a grant and they can participate if they like to. So how does we transform the system, and how is the setting? This is a very, very big question. I agree that we don't have just to transform university, but also society. That's for sure. But as a feminist, I think that I'm used to work even in much more micro transformation. So, for example, starting with the relation with our PhD students or students, trying to transform it and making visible that other form of doing are possible. That it didn't mean that you don't make mistake. And for example, power relations are always there. If someone say, oh, I have a very egalitarian group and there is no power relation, is probably someone that is denying power, because we all have power. We use our power. We can try to work it differently. And for example, it's something that from a feminist point of view, we are reflecting on how, which is the difficulty we have with this, how we want to have a different way of managing relation within, for example, a research group, but we have no exact clue on how to do it, and acknowledge the responsibility at the same time. So we are in a try model, okay? So in relation with the setting, I think that one of the problem of our university is that there is too much bureaucratical work and too much sectorization. For example, with the USV React, we make courses for teachers, students, and administrative people together, because we believe that gender-related violence need to be worked also through ages, through position, and if we wanted to make it a real change, is not making teacher against administrative or students against teacher, because this is not going to work. The real change need everybody to work. And for example, it worked very well, but we have a lot of difficulty in doing it. The dean of the university and the how you call it, the rector, the chief of the university in our university was agreeing with us. They like the idea, but you know, there is all this bureaucracy, and courses for teacher organized by this section, courses for administrative organized by this section, courses for students organized by this one, and they have to agree with each other, and they have different system in the computer to make to describe yourself. So the bureaucracy became the big problem in order to do something that was transforming. So I think that one of the problems we have is that even if we want to change things, sometimes it seems that the structure have to be maintained, because obviously the chief of the university cannot subscribe herself to the students because they have to delegate to other people. But that's require more flexibility from all the part, and is not always the case. Another of the problem is that in the courses, for example, they were not mandatory, and I agree that they are not in some point, but it happened that the people that come, most of the people that come were people already sensibilized with the topic. It didn't mean that there weren't a change, because obviously they learn more, we give them contacts, resource, and whatever, so I'm sure that they have been having an effect, but it's difficult. At the same time, for example, for the work we have been doing, we have been invited in many universities here in Catalonia to doing section with when they were defining the new policy of the university, to criticize their policy, to analyze them. So we participate in different things. We didn't decide what they have to do, but we give them suggestions. So it was a small way to try to change and to learn from each other. And also we created quite interconnected group of people from different universities that work together on this topic, and we support each other when we can. So about expertise, I think that one of the things is also that we don't use the expertise within the university in a very collaborative way. Departments are just normally are like I intended that if there were the where between the departments, I want discourse for me, this is mine, like if you were not just one body, okay, that work together. So and sometimes there is things that why don't we have, for example, within the social work department and the psychology department and whatever, we can create with the teachers some of the support unit, and also make students work on it as a practice. So we have expertise that are not getting used for giving response of the needing of the university. And when it happened that they get used is mostly because people do voluntary work. So a part of your teaching, a part of your researching, a part of your bureaucracy, on the top of all this, you also put your activism. So you work 24 hours a day. So it's like very strange things. Also, if we think we want to revert the idea of neoliberal system, but then we become involved ourselves in reproducing it. And that is a bit scary in some point. So I don't know if I answer about your question about setting, but if you
Oh, it's perfect.
There are quite a few questions in the chat now, and one of them goes back to what you just talked about, and maybe you can expand on it a little more. But I'm going to read them from the top. Evert Grohl asked, within higher education, what do you think the role of religion, Christianity, Islam, is as an incentive for gender-related violence?
You want me to one-on-one? Okay.
Yeah, let's do.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that I am myself an atheist, so I'm not a big fan of religion, and I think that religion are an institution in itself, and there are most religion, at least all the one that I know, are heteropatriarchal anyhow. So they obviously they are another element of cultural element that can support the culture of difference between gender, the dichotomy between gender, and whatever. If there are specific incentive within the university, I work in public university. I think that this can become strongly in private university and in private university that are religious university. I don't see that they are, at least in here, a key element in this sense. Nonetheless, we also, religion is part of our culture. So, for example, I have a Christian background. I don't define myself as Christian, but I have a Christian background, and we know about culpability, for example, is something that we bring on us even if we try not to. So is part of our culture, and in this sense is an important element, but I will not focus on them specifically unless we are in a specific space where there is a religious university. I don't know if, but if this person have a different experience, please tell us.
There is another question from the audience, from Anita Conrad. Thank you for the very interesting lecture. Could you give some examples for the institutional policies and their limitations and shortcomings that you've mentioned?
Yes. Yes, for example, what at least here, okay, that is what I know more, okay. We have a two set of policy, and one is the equality policy of the university, and the other is the protocol against sexual and gender-related violence, okay. Sometimes it's just one protocol, sometimes are two, sometimes are three, sometimes are divided by, for example, in my university is divided if you are students from students, or it involve a teacher or administrative, and can be involved with a student too, but is a different one. Or sometimes, for example, there is specific LGTB protocol and more violence against women protocol, but for me the big problem, the first big problem is that there is this equality plan and the protocol after they were two sets apart. You cannot really produce a change if we don't do an integrate politics within the university. Then it seems that there is something that become really, that in order to denounce, it seems that there to be something big, okay? So we don't tackle all this small violence that are going on. For example, one of the typical things is that we all know those professors that every 2 years have a new student lover. Okay, and it's not violence because they are adult, okay, but what does it mean that every 2 years, every 3 years you have a new student's level? How power is entering in this relation, okay? And why are we not? It didn't mean that university have to do something against this person, but why we are not talking about it? Why we don't talk about, for example, in a meeting a few days ago, they told me in a university, in a foreign university, they were using a policy in which they allow relation between, for example, a teacher and a PhD students. They don't enter in this, but you cannot be the PhD supervisor anymore because things can happen. It's not you are two adults, it's happened, that's not a problem, but you cannot be their supervisor because the power relation is going to be strong and it can make a bad favor and can produce violence, okay? So, or for example, what we do with a teacher that make LGBT comments in the classroom, okay? Here, there is a big a difficulty because when you protocolize it, it seems that, okay, you can do small things, you can you can say, okay, for 1 month you are not going to give this classroom anymore, but it's not changing the system and the situation. So I think that this is one of the big limitation. Another one is that the bureaucracy is very, very strong. For example, teacher here, many of them have they are state officer, so their working position, it's very difficult to move. So you have really to prove that they have been doing something extremely ugly without any possibility to have them, for example, not teaching anymore, okay? But this is difficult to happen. So what's happened sometimes is that, for example, we have cases in which a person that have been harassing 3 PhD students and subordinate teacher for years, he have 2 years of paid not working time.
Yeah.
So that's like, sorry.
And if I can, if I may, of course, we have another sort of complication that in theory we have a freedom in research and in teaching. So I remember there was a case going through the press about a philosophy professor at the UK. I forgot which university, but she was kind of questioning transsexual identity, because she said, here you have one gender and it's assigned to you by birth and that's it, and my philosophy is that. And so she was attacked for that, but she says this is my philosophical point of view, so I'm free to teach about this, and of course that kind of adds another layer, and we would all defend the freedom of our thoughts and of our teaching, and so I think it adds complications to that. But we have other questions from the chat, so sorry for cutting in. Let me take this by Shiva Swift, that in discussions there's a very often cited statistic is that says that only 3% of rape accusations are wrong. Do you know more about these studies, and what do you think about the number?
We have a number here, not about rape. I don't have this grade number on this, but we normally use here in Spain, we use a calculation that is being made by the Ministry of Defense, it's not Defense. Okay, the one that take care of penalty. I don't know now the name of the ministry. La Fiscalia, that I don't know exactly, but anyhow, is an official number that they say that in relation with the law of gender-related violence we have here in Spain, the statistics say that 0.03% are false. Okay, so and I don't have the data of rape, but I think that is much more the case, are much more the case of rape that are not being denounced that the one that are false denounced. A problem is that sometimes people that are against the gender ideology, they state that if there is not enough proof to prove the rape or the violence, it means that it was not a rape of the violence, but that's false. The fact that there is not proof, it didn't mean that it was a false violence. That is something different, and the cases are really, really low.
Shall we take up the next question, Silke? So there's a question by Helene Wolf, and it actually goes not to you, Barbara, but to Silke and myself. It's about the situation at the University of Innsbruck. Is there actually an independent contact point for victims of sexualized violence at the University of Innsbruck? So this would be the Arbeitskreis für Gleichbehandlungsfragen, as we call it in German, the so-called AKG. And that's the point at the university. It's a independent institution, so to say, inside the body of the university. And you can contact them with all when it comes to forms of discrimination, but also when it comes to forms of sexual harassment or violence. So that's the. I think we cannot share the link here because nobody can see it. But it's the Arbeitskreis für Gleichbehandlung.
Yeah, but I think when I read the question correctly, Helene Wolf, it's about the independence, isn't it? I mean, obviously the anti-discrimination or the equality referendum there is it's not an independent position. It's I don't think from a student point of view. I mean, this is also. I think it's really really important to see the perspective of the people who are who need the help in this. And I don't know about the ÖH, sort of the student body. They might offer also contact people, but to have a bureau, an office within the institution. But actually, it's located not in the main building. So you have to go into the main building. You pass all these, you walk the great halls. You pass all these great doors, and then until you come to this, I think the barriers are pretty high that you reach the person to talk. And we will have them here in this lecture series, and they do fantastic work, absolutely. And I would, from knowing them, I would definitely vouch for them for being independent. But I think the way to this person for a 20-year-old student is a long way. So if I get it right, Frau Wolf, I think that's kind of the way where you're coming from.
That's right, but they have a specific status. So they are. I mean, of course, you're right with all what you say, but indeed they have a very specific status in terms of being an independent entity inside. Of course, they're inside the university. That's true. But they have a very specific status. Otherwise, they couldn't deal with all these issues professionally. Right.
Here, for example, there is not this such a thing as an entity with specific status, and we are thinking we are one of the requests we are doing of our central government is to have one outside the university and for all the university, so that. Is not just from depending on the university, but depending on completely independent, and from all the university can converge there. But the problem is that anyhow, even if students don't feel comfortable to denounce, the things is that that it seems that teacher and the administrative staff are the one that denounce less. That's a big deal, I think.
And also, I mean, you were talking about subcontractors and people. I mean, that they would not find their way there. And I mean, I remember saying a colleague of us, Dirk, you know who I mean, Nikita Davan, who pointed out that the real internationality of any university actually happens after 6 o'clock at night and before 6 o'clock in the morning, when the cleaning stuff is in. So I mean, this is a part of our university which is completely kind of below the visibility barrier. I mean, they of course, I mean, they're a vivid part of this. They're part of the system, but I don't know who their spokesperson would be. Probably the contractor, and not sure if that's a good spokesperson. But that's another problem.
But just to share this information, because Barbara talked about it, this idea apparently in your region to set something up, right? I mean, there is of course also the Studentenombudsman in Vienna, in Austria, right? So there is something like another, I mean, independent. It's part of the federal ministry, but it's also a place where you can go to, so to say, and with all
but
these
specific
issues.
for universitarian? Specific
Sorry, what?
for university?
It's for all universities in Austria.
Okay.
It's a point where students can send their complaints, right? So, and they will take care of that. So that's also another level in the Austrian system that's relevant for all Austrian higher education institutions.
I may have to make an interview to you some point to explain me more and give me some link.
But I would have another question, because I think you mentioned these. Okay, sorry.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I mean, you mentioned these courses, and you said something like, these courses are sometimes like preaching to the converted or preaching to the choir, right? Because people come that are already interested in the topic. And I think a question that is very relevant for us also here when we try to strengthen these issues in the Aurora network is, how do we reach out to the colleagues and everybody at the university who currently doesn't think that this is a relevant topic for everybody at the university and for the whole institution, right? So how do we get to the other, people who are not on our side yet, so to say? Do you have any ideas or experiences when it comes to that?
Well, I mean that I think that there should be different level of courses and different kind of courses. And some of them I really think that should be mandatory for all teacher and staff. Maybe not the kind of course we prepared was a very course that start from questioning yourself, and it was a little bit empowering people in order to being able to detect and act against the gender-related violence. So maybe this is where a large course maybe is not necessary that everybody will take it, and maybe also it's better that if you are not already a small sensibility, you don't believe that you become an expert with this course, because you don't. So, but smaller course with few information what you cannot do and what you have to do and whatever, I think it should be mandatory. And and the sort of assuming responsibility and understanding, for example, also debating on what was the difference between free thinking and free cátedra and how do you say, and harassing people or saying people being exclusive with your students and whatever. So I think that's. But it's tricky, definitely. It's definitely tricky.
I think it goes back. Now, I think we were already at the limit of our time, and I think I can include it in my maybe concluding remarks. I think it does all go back to the system transformation, doesn't it? The culture of something. And what I really liked, Barbara, is that you also gave us, I mean, you talked about your work, but you also gave us sort of a national perspective, how things are done at your university, and you kind of stretched out to the south of the north, I think you said, where denial is at the moment the state, whereas the Anglo-Saxon approach is more the screening and safeties, creating an atmosphere of controlling. Again, that's part of a culture of doing things, and I'm still trying to figure out where Austria and Innsbruck stands on this. And I think it would be very interesting to see in the coming weeks where people place their institution and the national framework, of course, given in politics and policies, what can be done and what cannot be done, and where they are in this kind of in this process of system transformation. I think that's there were great ideas and a lot to think about also for the coming weeks. So let me conclude this session by thanking you again very, very much, Barbara. That was a very interesting lecture, and so to the point, and for answering all these questions for us. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, both of you.
I can only join Silke in thanking Barbara. It was really a pleasure to have you, and I hope we see you all again next week from Barcelona and Tarragona. We go to Naples, Federico II, our other Aurora partner universities, with Francesca Scamadella and Flora Di Donato. I think they are both at the law faculty there, protecting vulnerable people rights as a challenge to higher education, clinical legal education as a path towards social inclusion. So please join us again next week. Bring your own lunch, and see you again. Thanks again, Barbara.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.